Yesterday, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell vowed to keep interest rates low in response to the country's uphill battle against unemployment.
So Powell actually revealed that without misclassification errors in the Labor Department, the real unemployment rate is closer to 10%. That is the same level as the worst point of the Great Recession in 2008. Washington Post economics reporter, our friend Jeff Stein, he joins us now to discuss the benefits that low interest rates and more may bring to the labor market, but more importantly, the general fiscal story here. So, Jeff, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks so much. I love being on this program. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to set the stage a little bit for Powell's remarks because, in D.C. we have sort of the D.C. blob, and I don't mean that disparagingly necessarily, but you have
I do.
Institution after institution over the last few weeks coming out and sort of saying, Biden wants to spend $1.9 trillion. Is that too much? Does that risk overheating the economy, right? Mm-hmm. And you have the Congressional Budget Office, chaired by, run by someone who comes from mostly conservative think tanks, warning of the dangers of spending too much. You have the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, all these groups that most people haven't heard of, but they really make an impact on what lawmakers see. And Wall Street analysts saying, would Biden's plan run the economy too hot? And so yesterday you have all of that met with this massive counterattack from the Federal Reserve, from Trump's pick to run the central bank, with this massive statement that actually the risks of going too small are much greater than the risks of going too big. Right. Sort of the implicit message people are getting. So huge political implications for the debate over Biden's stimulus. Just weeks of people of the White House being asked, are you doing too much? Are you doing too much? Are you doing too much? And then the Federal Reserve, one of the sort of oracles that people in D.C. use as an arbiter for these kind of questions, saying no very aggressively the other way.
That's a very good point there, Jeff. And one of the things can you comment on here, because it didn't get enough attention, was that the real unemployment rate actually is 10%, worse than at the height of the Great Recession. I mean, that has massive implications for a lot of what's in the stimulus bill, around unemployment benefits, around checks, and more. Just lay out what it actually means to those people that we actually get some relief out the door, which is something that Powell actually outlined yesterday.
Yeah, so we lost about 22 million jobs in the spring and summer, and we recovered maybe about half of them. And when that recovery was happening, it happened at a relatively good pace. But in the last 3 or 4 months or so, we've basically seen a complete plateauing. So there's still 10, 11 million people who are out of work and who those jobs have not come back at all, and there's no progress towards bringing those jobs back. So Powell really, in emphasizing that people have dropped out of the labor market, particularly women, particularly mothers, we know a lot of mothers are dropping out of the labor market at extremely alarming rates, that those people, Powell is saying, still need help. Powell amazingly committed to inflation above 2%, saying, we're not anywhere near that, but if it gets there, we're going to be okay with it potentially. And that's a huge statement as well, because it suggests that the need to lift the bottom of the labor market is still much more important than fears about price increases.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's interesting because this is an area where, there was this growing elite consensus that you laid out of we may be doing too much here. You got Larry Summers out there. You got all these people writing op-eds saying, the real risk is that we're going too big here. And yet a new poll came out that said 40% are worried that it's too small. 40% think the amount is just right, and only 20% of the public is saying this is too much. So it seems like this is an area where the public actually understands what's going on far better than a lot of the elite tastemakers who are, in the pages of some of our most preeminent newspapers.
And I think for a lot of people, sort of my sources who are sort of more on the left, both inside Congress and out, I think there was a lot of not totally ill-founded skepticism that Biden would be able to ignore the sort of elite tastemakers that you're talking about. Biden has been in D.C. for, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, and has a history of, cutting bipartisan deals that a lot of people who are more progressive think have done a lot of damage to this country. And so there was a lot of concern that he would listen to that crowd, especially at a moment like this where you have moderate Republicans saying, come, lower your ask and make a deal. And I got to say, even the progressive activists I talked to are very impressed that the Biden White House has basically been able to tune out that part of the DC blob, that Biden is, and his White House chief of staff in particular, Ron Klain, are over and over again saying what you just said. The American people believe in this. I think a huge tell was when they were asked, why isn't this deal bipartisan? And rather than say we're going to do everything we can to get one or two Republican lawmakers on board to make it a Republican package in votes, the White House has started saying it's bipartisan because Republican voters support it. So I think that there are some people on the left. I mean, it's still early. Biden will still have plenty of time to do things that the progressives hate. But for now, at least, he seems to be tuning out some of the deficit scolds. And the White House people I've talked to have said that Larry Summers is making no impact on the debate within the administration, which I'm sure is music to a lot of people's ears who listen to the program.
Yeah. Jeff, what is your assessment, or what are the experts that you're talking to saying, not the deficit scold experts, but the normal ones we should be listening to, saying about how big the stimulus should actually be? Because there is a concern that it's not big enough. I mean, we've had this crisis ongoing for a long time now. There's a lot of permanent scarring in the economy. There's a lot of long-term structural damage that we're going to have to recover from. Is this actually a sufficient number?
I think there are certainly people who are worried about not just the current moment, but what happens with the variants. Like every morning, I feel like I'm now waking up and reading like a slow-moving horror story about these variants. I don't mean to scare people, and this isn't my area of expertise, so I probably shouldn't talk out of turn. But there seems like a pretty significant risk that these variants make the economic damage worse, or they make the vaccine distribution worse, and that we're in this rut for a longer period of time. And one of the really scary things about the current moment is just the political instability. I mean, Democrats have a little one vote. The Senate is literally deadlocked, right? 50-50. And a number of Democratic senators, I don't mean to be crass about this, but a lot of them are in their mid-80s, early 80s. Like that's, the odds of one of them, look at the life expectancy charts, like the odds of one of those people not making it through August, when unemployment benefits would expire under Democrats' plans, is like not insubstantial. And so one thing that I think, Senator Wyden, Senator Sanders, and others have pointed out is let's do automatic stabilizers. So if this situation gets worse, aid will flow automatically. The problem with that is that it dramatically increases the price tag of the bill. And so Democrats have walked away from, or not, I shouldn't get ahead of myself, but it seems like that's going to be out of the bill. And so that's one area where I think a lot of people would say that could be something that they'll regret in the future.
That's a great point.
And just so people know, automatic stabilizers are like it automatically, the unemployment benefits continue to kick in as long as we're in a crisis, and there's sort of numbers set so that metric happens and doesn't have to go back through another vote of Congress. The last thing, Jeff, that I wanted to get an update from you on is the status of the $15 minimum wage. You had, obviously, Senator Sanders fighting for that through budget reconciliation in the Senate, and even Chuck Schumer saying that he was supportive. You have the House progressives getting it added to the House's version of the reconciliation bill. Meanwhile, you had Biden come out and basically say this isn't going to happen. What do you see as the state of play there?
It looks, I think, contrary to my expectations, frankly, like it has a pretty good shot at passing the House. It's in Democrats' bill in the House, but there are still about 12, 13 Senate Democrats who are not on board who are not official co-sponsors of Bernie Sanders' Raise the Wage Act to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour over 4 years. I have emailed every single one of those Senate Democratic offices and asked for their position, and have not heard back that they're now supportive. But I think it's worth keeping in mind that, Joe Manchin has said that he supports raising the minimum wage. I don't think it's necessarily going to be to 15. And I don't know if it's going to be in this package. I think there are some people who I believe, a lot of people will say that something is not going to survive Senate procedure because they don't want it to. They'll say, under the rules of this, it's going to get stricken down because they don't like it. I have talked to people who I genuinely believe want this to get done, who are saying, sort of quietly, but acknowledging like this is going to be a tough lift for the parliamentarian to approve. So I think it's still a pretty long shot right now, but I think Democrats are setting themselves up to pass some sort of serious minimum wage increase at some point this year.
That's a good point.
Jeff.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you. Always great to see you.
Thanks, man.
Love being on. Thanks, guys.
Next on Rising, Democratic strategist and Montgomery County Council member at large, Will Jawando, and culture reporter for The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky. They're going to join us for Team Rising when we return.